Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas on Wednesday, May the 28th. And as we like to do once a week, we'll be chatting with our good friend Bill Katz, the editor of Urgent Agenda. Bill, it was Memorial Day yesterday or the day before. How did you enjoy Memorial Day?
Well, I enjoyed it very quietly.
Yeah.
We were in, and it's a very sad thing, but at one time, Memorial Day was commemorated, really, I think, throughout the country. They may
Hmm.
not have had a parade, although many communities, as I remember growing up, had their own local parade.
Hmm.
But you would barely know it was Memorial Day where I am.
Well, this is true, and it's very sad that is that way. It makes me wonder um, if we shouldn't go back to May 30th so that it's not a holiday or an extended weekend. At least it wouldn't be until every year. And also, maybe we should just rename it Decoration Day, so we kind of get back to the idea of what it was.
Yes,
It was not supposed to be a day off. Now you get a day off, and there's no. I don't have a problem with that, or people going boating or going making burgers or whatever. I mean, you have to expect that, but it's the lack of interest. Now I think some of that varies too, Bill, depending on how patriotic the area is.
yes,
And one of the things that I've always
definitely.
liked about Texas is that Texas is very patriotic. And so normally these days in Texas, there's a real patriotic um, flavor to them, that people think about it much more so than maybe other places. Now, New York, I had always thought would be perfect for Memorial Day because it's New York, and everything, parades and everything. And so I don't know. I don't know why aren't the politicians marching on Memorial Day parades anymore, Bill, in New York. I don't know.
I can't venture a guess. You know, one of the things about New York is that any holiday was an excuse for a parade, and
Yeah,
and a big parade, and all these city officials would march with their sashes on because they were all
yeah.
given assignments, grand marshal and this, and I do think that one change that I saw for the better is that it was much less of a commercial holiday this year than I'd seen before. Many people in the past had pointed out that this is not a holiday but a commemoration day,
Yes.
and it had turned into basically a commercial day. I thought that the commercial part of it was very subdued this year, and
Mm.
I think maybe people felt, well, it's really time to recognize what the holiday is and not do something in bad taste, and maybe it was a corrective of some kind. Uh, there were some good television stories that some of the networks did about soldiers who had given their lives and in past wars. But fortunately for us as a nation, we have not had a large war since the Korean War. We
Hmm.
have had smaller wars. We did have Vietnam, so I guess I would have to include that. But it is really with the Memorial Days I remember were right after the Second World War, in which we really knew what war was, and we
Right.
really knew what sacrifice was. Much less of a feeling today. And of course, what is taught in the schools, if anything is taught in the schools, it certainly is not patriotism.
Right. No, I agree. I agree. I think it's sad that we've lost some of the patriotic flavor. I hope it comes back. I know President Trump is planning this big parade
Yes,
for July 4th. I think that's a great idea, actually,
yes,
because I think anything that promotes patriotism is healthy for the country. I mean, it's good for the young people to know where they came from and why they're here. And Memorial Day is a big
right.
reason as to why they are here. So anyway, around here we had a couple of there are some parades around here as well. So we were traveling, so I didn't actually get to see the parades, but I heard about it on television. Well, Bill, let's begin today with a story that you were covering at Urgent Agenda, and that's the talks between Iran and the United States. Now, President Trump spoke today. I didn't see the whole thing, but I guess he had one of these press conferences again. And he was saying that there's good news with respect to Iran. And he also said, Bill, that the time is running out. I'm paraphrasing him, but he said, they can either make the right decision or force him to make a very tough decision. But he's apparently ready to do both, Bill.
I think that's true. Look, it's obvious that he is trying to make a deal, which may or may not be the right course right now. I think that he has probably made some substantial concessions to Iran, and that may not be the right move. Who knows? But he thinks he can get a deal out of it that would be acceptable, or at least minimally workable. He hasn't said it's a guarantee, but it's clear that he does not want to go to war. I mean, he doesn't. He's trying to avoid attacking Iran, and I think Iran is getting that message. I don't know if that's a good idea or a bad idea. It depends on your enemy and what the circumstances are. But I know that there are many people who are concerned that he will make a bad deal simply to avoid a military confrontation, and that could be worse than no deal at all.
Now, Bill, if he chooses to attack Iran, wouldn't he have to go to the Congress and at least do one of these resolutions like President Bush did with Afghanistan and with Iraq? Wouldn't it be wise for him to get a resolution like that so that he's not all by himself if the military operation doesn't go well, Bill?
That's a very, very good question, and I don't know what the. I know that there's a War Powers Act,
Yes.
and that he would have to within 30 days go to Congress to take certain military actions. But I think the War Powers Act uh, only applies if we're attacked and the attack was not expected. I don't know if it applies to a situation where he is going to launch a unilateral attack or an attack with another country like Israel, simply because we feel it is the best policy at the time. I don't know. In other words, I don't know what the law actually reads. He has not gotten any approval from Congress. He may feel that he couldn't get it. He may feel that even his own party might not give it to him, and maybe he's staying away from that. We know very little about it. We do know that there's a lot of worry. A group of European nations a few days ago, these were European nations, warned the United States of the danger of making deals with Iran. Now that's a startling development. Usually it's the United States warning the Europeans, but apparently the Europeans are very, very concerned about Iran with a nuclear weapon. They are, of course, the nearest target.
Right.
When their lives are involved, they suddenly get interested. Uh, but at this point, Trump has said so many contradictory things that we had a good meeting with Iran today, but if things don't work out, there might be a bad meeting with Iran. He has not made any attempt to prepare the American people for any unilateral action. He makes these statements, but then things seem to calm down. So we're waiting the way everybody else is as to what is going to happen. Will Iran agree to something that we can agree to? My feeling is probably not, but he can flower it over in such a way that he can keep the talks going without actually committing anything. And that was what a lot of people are concerned about. They're afraid he will make the deal at any price gesture that could put us really in a very bad box.
Well, there's two things that he has to consider. The first one is public support, and that I think would be legitimized with a resolution.
Hmm.
If he got a resolution out of the Congress, that at least would put people on board or on the record that they support the invasion, just like President Bush, well, both President Bushes did when they took us to war. The other thing that he has to worry about is that if he gets a deal, it's going to have to go through the Senate because otherwise it's not a treaty. It's not, it's the same thing that happened to Obama. He got a
Yes.
deal, but he never got a treaty. So, I mean, those are big issues. I don't personally have a problem with attacking Iran as long as we understand that it's going to be a very difficult assignment. And I'm perfectly capable of trusting the military to do this. But it could be one of those things, Bill, would you just have to unleash the military and take whatever criticism comes with it from our so-called allies, because we're going to be dropping some pretty nasty bombs if we have to destroy those bunkers, Bill.
That's exactly right, and I think we're damned if we do and damned if we
Right.
don't. On the one hand, they don't want to go to war uh, because they don't want to go to war. They never do. And on the other hand, if we do have to go to war, they will have to support us in some way to keep their ally status, but not with any enthusiasm. But they don't have any enthusiasm for it. We really, it's very hard to gauge exactly what our allies would do in that situation, or we could simply go directly to NATO for approval. And I can't imagine NATO turning down the United States.
No, probably not. But NATO wouldn't be able to contribute too many planes to the
No,
mission. That's the problem with NATO. That NATO is, it's a nice building. The people who work there look very military. They got all these great uniforms. But other than the United States, I don't know of any other country that could even be part of this mission. Remember with Iraq, when we had that famous 30 country mission or whatever it was to attack Iraq,
yeah.
it ended up being a lot of Americans.
Well,
and
that's generally what happens.
yeah,
Our so-called allies send troops inevitably. But then we find that what the troops are doing is painting barracks
right,
and having dinner, engaging in multicultural conversations
right,
with people who don't speak their language. Uh, I mean, there were foreign troops, German troops, for example, in Afghanistan, but I don't recall any great battles that
no,
involve them. So we could be out there alone, except of course with Israel,
right,
because if there were an attack on Iran, actually Israel would be leading it, and we would assume to be helping them.
yeah.
It's it is certainly something that if it occurred, it would not be a shock, but at the same time, it would be a surprise, and the country is not in the mood for it.
Well, the country's not ready for it. They have not been prepared. And I always gave President Bush a lot of credit because he spent much of 2002 preparing the country for the invasion of Iraq. And by the
Yes,
time it happened, everybody knew that it was in the plan. So hopefully he will do that. Now, the other big story regarding talks, this is Ukraine and Russia, and I'm personally getting frustrated with Ukraine over the whole issue, and that's because Ukraine cannot win this war, and I'm not sure the Russians can do it either. But it seems like neither side wants to deal with reality. I
that's
mean,
right.
so they're both sort of maybe out of pride. And look, I understand pride from the Ukrainian standpoint. They were invaded; their cities have been bombed. So look, I can understand that. But at the same time, they cannot pull this off. And Putin, I don't know what he's thinking, but I don't think the people in his country are very crazy about anything. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen in Ukraine. Maybe if we just say, hey, guys, thanks for letting us work with you, but we got other interests. I mean, if the American people are not interested in getting involved with Iran, I guarantee you there's a lot less interest in getting involved with Ukraine, Bill.
Oh, absolutely. I don't think there's any plan on the table that would involve American troops in Ukraine. It would be unleashing the weapons Ukraine already has, but has been restricted from using, and supplying new weapons and saying, fellas, when you're ready, give us a call. But that has not worked. I mean, the war going on in Ukraine is vicious, absolutely vicious, entirely from the Russian perspective. They are using weapons and engaging in assaults that are the strongest since the war began, at the same time that they're claiming to be negotiating for peace. And I can understand the president's frustration, but he also knows he does not want to send American boys in there. That the most we would do would be to send more and more supplies and newer kinds of supplies, and then say, go fight your war and let us know if you're interested in peace. We're not making it, and I think one reason we're not making it is I don't really believe that our enemies, in this case Russia, that our enemies really believe that we want to go to war. And when an enemy believes you're hesitant, the enemy is not going to be less aggressive; he'll be more aggressive. Hello.
Sorry about that.
Oh,
Something
no, that's
happened
all right.
here with the microphone.
Okay.
What I'm
Okay.
saying is that maybe what President Trump should do is to say, okay, I'll tell you what. Everybody wants me to do something in Ukraine. Why doesn't Europe put together a fighting force, and we'll show up with them and see how many Europeans are really willing to back up anything? Because I don't think
Mm.
they could put together. I mean, they could probably do a peacekeeping mission, and that's
Yes.
worthless, really. But they couldn't put together an army of 2 or 3 thousand soldiers. None of these countries.
Yes.
So if there is a military involvement, it's going to be once again the United States, and the public doesn't want that.
No,
And I and,
definitely not.
and I don't blame the public for being hesitant about sending their sons to Ukraine. I mean, look, it's important, but maybe not that important, Bill.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. The public is sick and tired of the Ukraine war anyway. Does not feel it has that much of a stake in either side, and just doesn't want to send our troops to fight in a war that is already endless. I mean,
Right.
it isn't even the beginning of the war. I think that the only thing that Trump could do would be to send increased military aid to Ukraine without American troops. But more weapons, more of a certain kind of weapons, and get on the sidelines and say, "We are ready to help you negotiate peace. Call us when you're ready."
That's about it, as far as I can see. Send them some weapons. We haven't. I mean, we've already sent a bunch of weapons, but I would require the Europeans to pick up a little bit more of that bill, because so far as I understand, they have not picked up as much as we have, and they're
Yes,
much closer to it than we are. I mean,
of
they're more
course.
impacted by it than we are, but
Yes, of course.
it's absolutely great. I mean, crazy. Well, let's come here to the United States for a little bit, Bill, and talk about some of our issues. It looks like the Democrat Party all of a sudden woke up and found out that they have a real problem with men, the
Yes.
masculine vote. And they have started a campaign. They're spending $20 million to start a campaign to connect with men. And
Boy,
the spokesman, I believe, Bill, of the campaign is either the governor of Minnesota or this young man from the DNC, David Hogg, Hogg.
yes.
And apparently, these two guys are going to persuade men across the country that it's time to get on board because the Democrat Party is the party of everybody. I would suggest, Bill, that what if they want to really connect with American men, I would suggest that they watch more John Wayne movies
Well, that's
and
true.
and just get a sense of what being a man is, Bill.
Well, yes, and they have no interest in doing that really, because the dirty little secret is that the men in the Democratic Party believe in that party, and they have been made to believe that any expression of military prowess is embarrassing, that we're probably wrong, and that Trump is a warmonger, and we are the peacemakers.
Right.
I mean, this is not the Democratic Party, in my view, is not a political party any longer. It's an
Mm-hmm.
association. They might get back into some kind of action, but they have to do a lot more than to present American men with some options that none of them have any interest in. They have got to give the signal that they understand that men are part of the country and that they have ideas, they have values, and they are not going to take those values from a dead party.
Right. Or maybe, Bill, they can go back and watch some speeches, convention speeches from Harry Truman, John F. Kennedy, or that generation of Democrats. They had no problem connecting with men back then.
That's right.
In fact, I was looking at the issue from a timeline. The problem with the Democrats and men began under President Reagan.
Yes.
And it's been consistent all along that white men vote Republican.
Hmm.
And then what happened in the last election is that those white men who have historically voted Republican were now joined by Hispanic men, by black men, and now all of a sudden, that big, so-called emerging majority that they thought they were going to have because of Hispanics isn't emerging anymore. and they're having a real problem with men. And Bill, I can tell you this, and pardon me for going a little too long here, but I just want to make a quick point. Uh, that convention that we saw last year, if you want to understand why they're not connecting with men, just watch that convention.
Oh, absolutely.
It's like
Absolutely.
80% of the speakers were female. All the topics were women's topics. They had no interest in fatherhood, or everything was abortion,
That's right.
or, and again, guys are not, I'm not saying that there aren't liberal guys, but I think most guys are not going to buy into that, Bill.
That's exactly right, and you know the way they're going to present themselves to the male vote. They're going to send out a bunch of old guys who stuck around the Democratic Party and who once served as cooks in the army, and so they're going to send them out in their military uniform and a pot, to say,
Right.
I was there," and they'll send them out in pairs. Joe. I remember when you or I were together as we liberated Venezuela or
Right.
wherever they call it, and how we fought for those good meals. And I'm so proud of the fact that I marched in with my unit. And they're going to sound like ridiculous idiots. They really are. They already do. But the problem with the Democratic Party is the Democratic Party.
Right. Well, that's it. I mean, they've become, like you said, a party that doesn't really know what it wants or who it is. I think they've been influenced way too much by these left wing groups.
Oh, absolutely.
And you look at, I mean, if you were to point, let's say, think about who would be the 5 biggest spokespeople that they have: AOC, Bernie Sanders, one of those ladies from the whatever they call that, the squad. There's just
Squad,
a lot
yes.
of a lot of them are women, and but they're left of center women. That's the problem.
That's what they don't understand.
Yeah, if it was like Nikki Haley, for example, Nikki Haley would have no trouble with the white male or the male vote, because she, well, her husband is military. She was always tough on the military. She was a serious governor. So Nikki Haley wouldn't have this problem, but it's AOC
Oh,
and those
absolutely.
people. Yeah.
Yes, you can just see them showing AOC in an ad, doing her little girl routine and
Right.
saying, "Is this the commander in chief?"
Right.
And men will know what to do. It's
Yeah, it won't take long.
no.
Just even a whisper of that. But I'm not even sure that because there's a lot of talk in the Democrat Party, because of this male problem that they have, that they're going to have to nominate a white man in 2028. In fact, that's what our Jasmine Crockett, our famous representative from down here, is saying, that they're already preparing all the donors, because they have to go out and find a nice white boy. Those are her words, by the way.
That's right.
I mean, it's pretty incredible that she could speak like that, and apparently nobody's offended in the media that it's racist. But nevertheless, she thinks, but it's more than that. It's going to take a lot more than nominating Shapiro or nominating the fellow from Kentucky.
Yes.
Might even have a very tough time winning his own state of Kentucky.
Well, that's it. I mean, how do you deal with a situation where you're stuck with the party saying, "Look, you got to have a white man at the top," when the white man at the top, who is the biggest vote getter in the Democratic Party, is Josh Shapiro, and he was turned down for vice president by the great planner Kamala Harris, because there was a section of the party that wouldn't have him.
Right.
And they're not going to be any more pro Shapiro than they were before. I don't think Shapiro could get the nomination, and I think for ugly reasons, and they don't know how to fix it. There's no party leadership. I think they do have a new national chairman. I think he's from Minnesota.
Right.
But you never see anybody out there fighting for the party. They want to avoid talk about the party.
Well, the only thing they can hope for, Bill, is that Trump just collapses politically.
Yes.
That's their only hope, that he just collapses politically, that everything goes wrong, and that somehow, I mean, they can tell you in 2026 or 2028 that they were right about Trump and that Trump is this or Trump is that. But again, I personally don't see Trump collapsing. I think he may have troubles like other presidents do, but I don't think he's going to be collapsing politically. In fact, another question that I wanted to bring up, another issue, is that his polling data is creeping up. I mean, he apparently is not going down anymore. He's now creeping up. Several polls have come out that he's creeping up, and I think, Bill, it's because the other side has nothing to offer. I think a lot of it is that.
Yes, and anything they might have to offer, they seem to be offering to men on a rusted platter. In other words, we'll have you, we'll let you in the party also, but just understand what the rules are. It's
No,
it's a dead party. It really
it
is.
is.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I think you're exactly right. That's exactly the right word. It's a dead party, desperately looking to become or to be reinvented as maybe another party. I mean, I don't know enough about history to know what happened to the Whigs back in the 19th century, but it couldn't have been any worse than this.
No, but you did have a situation where the Democratic Party split severely in 1948. You had a party that was going to renominate Harry Truman, who had taken over for President Roosevelt, but you also had a party that was split over the civil rights issue, and there were people who walked out of the Democratic Party that year and formed under Strom Thurmond a new political party or a new political movement, and yes, the solid South, which is what the Democrats always needed to win, was much less solid that year, and that was a year when people did actually walk out of the party, and it was a disaster for the Democrats.
Right. Now, another disaster happening is NBC ran a big story about how the Obama magic is gone. How
Hmm.
there's just, hope and change just ran out of time, I guess. And yeah, they love Obama. If he goes to a convention, I'm sure they'll cheer him and welcome him in open arms. But they're not going to be paying a lot of attention to what he's counseling or suggesting because
Right.
there just doesn't seem to be. I mean, I don't know, Bill, if you remember the scene from the last election when he went to Philadelphia and he was sitting there speaking to a bunch of young black men. And you could just tell the look in Obama's face like, wow, these people, I mean, they used to faint for me. They were
That's right.
fainting
Oh
for me
yeah,
in 2008, and now they're sitting there bored to tears listening to what I have to say.
that's right. Well, they know that there was an alternative, because the problems that they had as men were problems that President Trump was addressing. The
Right,
Democratic Party was only addressing the things that they were told to say, and Obama. I don't think that there is any great love for Obama among the men of the Democratic Party, because he never did anything for them,
right. That's it.
and
That's true.
that's it. So I don't know. I have no idea what they're going to do. I feel that this is one of those very few times in history that a new political party does make sense, but I don't see where it comes from.
Well, you would need a lot of money to put it together, I think. They could probably find the money. But my fear is that the new party they put together isn't even it's a left wing party.
Yes.
And in essence, that's not really helping them win. It would just divide the party into a very well financed left wing of the party, and then leave the more centrist Democrats somewhere without cash and without much leadership. But it is a dead party. I like
Yes.
the way you expressed it. Well, let me go to a couple of other topics here, Bill, this week. And this situation with between the University of Harvard or Harvard University and President Trump. Look, I'm all for academic freedom, but what Harvard is doing is unthinkable. I mean, it seems to me that the unsafest place for a Jewish American today is one of these universities, Bill.
Oh, absolutely. And we used to learn in high school, before we got to these universities, that with freedom comes responsibility. We hear a lot about the freedom. We don't hear much about the responsibility. And they're trying to claim to people, places like Harvard, that they are defenders of free speech. That's almost laughable. I mean,
Yes.
they had demonstrations that shut down anybody who disagreed with them.
Right.
And the speech given by uh, what's his name, Pelly of CBS, was a
Oh,
public embarrassment. I mean,
yes.
it just was a public embarrassment, and I think probably sealed the deal for people who thought, well, maybe the press will help us. The press will not help you. The press is on the wrong side.
That's right. Yeah, that speech by that fellow was so stupid.
Yes.
Because frankly, I think, Bill, anytime they get on this, Trump is a dictator and Trump is a threat to democracy, it's almost like the boy who cried wolf.
Oh,
Nobody's
absolutely.
listening to that anymore.
Sure.
I mean, you can criticize Trump in a million ways, and I've criticized him, whenever I felt that it was appropriate. But I criticize him over policy. I have never felt that he's a threat to democracy or that he's a dictatorship. Now, maybe the reason that I can say that, Bill, is because in a way I kind of know a little bit about what dictators do. Because
Yes.
as a kid, I lived through a
That's
dictatorship, and I
right.
remember dictatorships shutting down newspapers and putting people in jail for political reasons, like my father's cousin who was put in a political prison. So I kind of know a little bit of how they work. And look, even in his worst days, I mean, Trump is nothing like that, Bill.
No, absolutely not. He is not a dictator. When he has been stopped by a court, he's followed the court order. He might protest it, but he follows it. We haven't arrested any judges, and he hasn't tried to arrest any members of the opposition party. He's no dictator. He's certainly a little on the thuggish side, and a little on the "I'll push you, you push me, I'll push you" side. But that's very far from being a dictator.
But it wasn't Truman that way too, in a way.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Truman had a lot of problems with Congress. He had a lot of problems with industry, with the steel
Yes.
industry. He had problems with unions. He had problems with civil rights groups. Truman had a lot of opposition. Nobody really believed that he would win the 1948 election, and he really won it because the Republicans were so overconfident
Mhm.
that they barely made a case. They nominated Thomas E. Dewey of New York, a kind of milquetoast candidate for the second time, by the way. They nominated him in 1944 as well. And he ran a nothing campaign, believing he would walk into the White House, and he only walked by it. He didn't
That's
get
right.
into it. He just walked by it. Said,
Well,
"Hello, guys."
hello, guys. Let me take a tour of this place.
Yes,
But it's funny that you mentioned Dewey because I remember back in 1973 that they had a party where it was supposed to be the 25th anniversary of Dewey winning the election, and it was like a joke. It was not a real
yes,
party, of course. But they threw this party to celebrate the 25th anniversary of President Dewey
yes.
winning or a candidate doing, and yes, you can become overconfident, and I suppose he did. But let me bring up one last subject, Bill, and that this is, I think, a very serious subject, and that is this auto machine or auto pen,
The
whatever,
pen, yes,
yeah, in the White House. And Bill, I'm sure everybody has gotten a letter from the president that was probably signed by an auto pen. You cannot expect the president to sign every letter to every high school graduate in the country,
yes.
or so I expect that. But what the issue here is that major policy decisions were made or were signed by the auto pen, and who was turning on the auto pen, and who was approving it. I think that's a legitimate inquiry, Bill, because I hate to tell you this. I never thought I would say this, Bill, but I'm beginning to think that it is true that he really didn't know what was going on.
That's probably true because a letter signed by an auto pen. I don't know if there's any law on the auto pen. I mean, I don't know if it's these things are written into law, but people are raising the issue. If he didn't actually sign it himself, is there a law? I mean, did he signs things into law with an auto pen? Is there a law? I mean, it says it's supposed to be signed by the president,
Right.
which is not by a machine. I think they're going to have to address it legally and decide, as you said, the president cannot sign every letter. Although in World War II, Mrs. Eisenhower, General Eisenhower's wife, asked him to commit to signing every letter that he sends home to a family of a boy who'd been killed in action,
Right.
and that he did. He did. But to do it generally, that's all the president would be doing was signing his name. There has to be some way of making something legal without the president actually signing it physically.
Yeah. I think it's a real scandal. I really do, because I'm convinced more and more that it wasn't just that somebody was running the auto pen. I'm not sure he even knew what was going on. I think there
That's
must have
right.
been days where he was detached and really didn't know. And maybe those were the days when the people around him took advantage of that, because I mean there are things that were done by President Biden that I never thought he would do, because when he was first elected, I thought he would actually turn out to be a disappointment for the Democrats, because I thought he would turn out to be kind of, moderate Joe, centrist Joe,
Yeah,
who was against abortion and in favor of traditional marriage, that kind of Joe. And
that's right.
even on immigration, he was never a immigration crazy person, Bill. I mean,
No.
and look at what
In
he's
fact,
turned out to be.
yes, in fact, he had a history of making racist remarks. And I think I think the party dreamed of a situation where they would have to deal with him one more time, but they would have Kamala Harris ready to take over eventually as president, and they would tolerate Biden this one more time if he would simply remain silent, go into his basement,
Right.
which he did, and run for president. But things didn't work out that way, and the party they have no real bench. I mean, there's no wanting of anybody in the
No.
party except a wanting for AOC, and that consists of 12 people.
That's right. And they don't even live in her district. So
That's right.
I mean, from what I understand, she's not popular in the district. And if the Republicans could actually put up a candidate in her district, who knows? Stranger things have happened. But speaking of that, Bill, before we go, let me ask you about New York for a second, because I just saw a poll that
Yeah,
has this lady, Stefanik, in a competitive race with your governor, Koshal, or whatever her name is.
Hochul.
Uh, yeah, Hochul, right? It's Hochul, right? Yeah,
Hochul.
Hochul. Okay, I'm sorry. I
That's
had
all
the
right.
got the wrong letter.
Nobody
But
knows her
apparently,
anyway.
she's. I mean, if you're an incumbent and you're running for reelection, and you're at 44% of whatever number she's in, that's not a good number. So maybe there's a chance that Stefanik could actually be your next governor, Bill.
She can. As you know, she was nominated by President
Right.
Trump to be UN ambassador, and it was a very popular nomination. People felt on our side felt she would be perfect with the UN, but then they looked at the numbers in Congress and realized that if she was UN ambassador, she'd no longer be a congresswoman, and the Republicans in the House would lose a seat, and they prevailed upon her to not to accept the nomination for the UN, but give it back, and she would be given some other assignment in the Republican Party in Congress. I think they gave her some big position of leadership in the House of Representatives. Uh, Frankly, I think they should have left her as UN ambassador. She would have been a very good one. But she is quite popular in the party. I don't know if she is popular enough to overcome the traditional Democratic vote in the party, because upstate there's a big Republican vote also, but it is I mean a Democratic vote also, but it is more sane. So nobody knows at this point. First of all, if she even wants to run for governor,
Right. Right.
maybe she doesn't want to run for governor. Maybe she has her eyes on something else. But the governor we have now is not popular. She's not unpopular. She's kind of not there.
Right. Right.
Some people know what her name is. Maybe they will recognize her on a restaurant menu or something like that. But no one goes around saying I want my daughter to be just like Governor Hoopel
Right.
or something.
Right. Or whatever. Yeah. No,
Yeah,
you're
or
right.
whatever. Yeah.
She's not exactly. She's not Cuomo. Whatever his faults may have been, at least everybody knew
Yes.
who he was. And speaking of Andrew Cuomo, he's apparently going to have some real opposition from the left when he runs for mayor.
Yes.
There's a gentleman there who's running who's apparently doing quite well. from the left. I mean,
Yeah, yes, there is. Yes, he is. Now, of course, the Democrats don't actually know him, but there is a guy on the left who is somewhat
right?
somewhat anti-American,
Yeah, I would.
and he's anti-Israel,
Right,
and he wants to be governor, and he has developed his own little group. People who don't even know where New York State is,
right,
who are ready to vote for him. So, as far as the Republicans go, the miracle will be if the Republicans nominate anybody. That they have to first decide what days of the week they can take off from golf
right.
to run a campaign. The Republican Party in New York is just an embarrassment. It really
Right.
is.
No, it really is. And it's a shame because the opportunity is there. Well,
Yes.
Bill, as always, thank you so much for your time. Have a great week. And I can tell we're going to have a lot to talk about next week. So,
Oh, a great deal, and in the weeks to come.
in the weeks to come. But thank
Yes,
you, as always, for your time and have a good remaining rest of the week. And we'll touch base again next week.
I look forward to it, Silvio.
All right. Thank you so much. Our good friend, Bill Katz, the editor of Urgent Agenda, talking about a lot of issues. Iran. Bill had something about Iran that he wrote today over at Urgent Agenda. And, just a lot of topics that are very important. But this auto pen issue, I think there's something there that needs to be looked at because I'm beginning to fear that he wasn't really on top of anything. And there may have been some, let's say, some executive orders that were signed that maybe he didn't really know what he was doing. So I hate to put it that way because we're talking about the man with nuclear, who can, fire nuclear weapons. But nothing surprises me anymore. I mean, everything coming out of that White House. Well, thank you for listening. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, and we'll talk later. Bye-bye, everybody.